Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the news from the global economy. Coming up, Gazans are hopeful unity government may bring change, and Myanmar sees a new revolution online. First, the headlines. Hong Kong shares sank more than 2% on Monday, weighed down by the worst unrest in the city since China took back control in 1997. Though the stock exchange insisted it would continue to operate as normal, 17 banks were forced to close 29 branches across the city. Retail sales are also expected to be hit by the pro-democracy protests, as mainlanders typically flock into the city during China's Golden Week holiday, set to start next week. Fitch Ratings said, however, it is unlikely the protests would be large or widespread enough to have a material effect on the economy or financial stability.
Citizens, Hong Kong is our home. For a long time, Hong Kong can develop with stability because everyone is peaceful, abides by the law, and respects the law. We do not want chaos to break out in Hong Kong and do not hope for the disruption of everyone's daily lives.
Travelers flying to and from Europe could face more disruption on Tuesday as pilots at Deutsche Lufthansa plan another walkout over retirement benefits. The strike will affect long-haul flights departing from Frankfurt, Germany's busiest international airport. The airline and its pilots have been caught in a row for more than 2 years over retirement benefits. Air France pilots on Sunday ended one of their longest strikes despite failing to reach an agreement with management. Apple is likely to suffer a record fine of several billion euros over accusations it prospered from illegal tax deals with the Irish government. Preliminary findings from the European Commission's investigation into Apple's tax affairs in Ireland show it benefited as much as 108 billion euros in offshore cash. The Silicon Valley company allegedly profited from a rate of less than 2% after striking backroom deals with Ireland's authorities. Brussels is also investigating similar deals between Starbucks and the Dutch government and Fiat with Luxembourg. Israeli Finance Minister Yair Lapid presented the outline for the 2015 state budget, promising no tax hikes and passage of a 0% VAT plan for new homebuyers. The $88 billion budget includes an increase to 3.4% in the budget deficit target and a $1.6 billion defense budget supplement. The finance ministry said it planned consistently smaller deficits starting in 2016, but had to maintain the deficit plan to account for Operation Protective Edge. Higher deficits increase rather than reduce Israel's debt burden and could eventually lead credit ratings agencies to reduce Israel's credit rating.
If the previous budget was a budget of crisis, the current one is a budget of hope and promise. 2 years ago I said, we're here to make a change, and now this change is happening.
In the wake of the summer war between Hamas and Israel, a recent unity agreement between Hamas and Fatah could offer Gazans some hope. But Fatah's failure to pay Hamas civil servants their salary is so far keeping things from moving forward.
Palestinian parties Hamas and Fatah came to a unity agreement late last week in Cairo. Part of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas stipulated that the Palestinian Authority would take civil control over Gaza from Hamas, and that is set to move forward. But the PA's failure to pay salaries to Hamas civil servants nearly created an insurmountable break between the two parties. Indeed, the deal was not a certainty by any means, and reactions have been mixed among Palestinians.
I am not optimistic because this is not the first time they have agreed, and always they come back to a disagreement.
It is a good start for the unity agreement, and that should be implemented on the ground. The crossings should be open, and the unity government should govern Gaza.
50 days of violence between Israel and Hamas caused destruction that will cost $7.8 billion to rebuild, including $2.5 billion for homes and $250 million in energy, according to the Palestinian Authority. Israel has not lifted the blockade on construction materials entering Gaza. For now, the UN is monitoring what rebuilding is happening. In lieu of new materials, Palestinians in Gaza look to collect iron and crush rocks of broken buildings. With more than 100,000 Palestinians displaced in Gaza, for some, the unity deal is about moving forward.
As an unemployed Palestinian graduate, what I care about is the party who will move us forward. It does not matter who will be, Fatah or Hamas, or any other party. What is important is the situation of the country should be better.
7 years of growth in the Palestinian economy is over in the wake of the violent summer, according to the World Bank. The economy is expected to decline by 4% in 2014.
And as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gets ready to address the General Assembly at the UN in New York to set the record straight on Israel, we're joined now by business development consultant Asaf Luxemburg for a discussion of the economic reality of Israel's advocacy problem. Mr. Luxemburg, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So also in the wake of these discussions that we've seen, basically the speeches by Abbas and Prime Minister Netanyahu, what can Israel do to improve its public image, public advocacy?
Well, I would say that first of all, before we talk about solutions, we need to better understand our problem.
Okay.
And I would say that I think in Israel we invented some sort of a false term we call hasbara.
Right. Which for our viewership means?
From the Hebrew word of explanation.
Right.
Now, I think hasbara for many Israelis come from the source of let's try to explain to the audience that we are right and the other side is wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, although I believe that is true as an Israeli, as a marketing guy, I understand that this is probably irrelevant for the majority of the broader conversation in Israel.
Right.
Because I would believe that the majority of the people around the world are not necessarily following the UN General Assembly right now. They care about sports, the economy, their mortgage, their kids' education.
Yeah.
And my question is, as a marketer, what is it that we Israelis or we Israel bring to them? Not just on specific days where there are big things happening, also on regular days. And I'm part of a school of thought that actually says that the Israel of beyond the conflict is much more appealing and much more interesting than the Israel of the conflict. So I think generally our problem is that we are waiting for someone to say something about the conflict, then we would answer back, but the conversation keeps around the conflict. And we have a lot of other things to share that are very relevant to the world.
Right.
So that's for our problem.
So practically speaking, right. So what exactly does this mean?
So more practically speaking, if I'll get to the solution part, strategically, what I think we have to do is niche marketing. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is doing right now is actually very efficient as a Hasbara act.
Right.
And that's what he said he's going to do. He's going to represent the truth of Israelis in the halls of the UN, if I remember. He said something similar to that.
Right.
Now, that is very effective for a specific target audience that is A, interested about the conflict, and B, ready to hear facts and historical figures before they make up their minds.
Okay.
Now, the question is, what do we do with the rest of the public audience out there? What do we convey to them?
So I'm going to have to stop you here for a second, Mr. Luxemburg, because I'm more interested in hearing really the economic perspective on all of this, really. What exactly is the impact on the economy?
At the end of the day, it's not just tourism as many people think. It's not let's bring more tourists to Israel and do PR for Israel.
Right.
It translates to foreign direct investments.
Okay.
So, for example, a great case study that we, as people who deal with these issues, use a lot is the book Startup Nation, that not only retold the story in an effective way, it brought a lot of investors to Israel. Mm-hmm. The marketing power of the brand of Paris or Brazil is worth a lot of money to their economies. And in a way, you could claim that we have a deficiency in branding. A lot of times people come to Israel, they're very surprised for the good. They say, we didn't expect to see what we saw here.
But part of the reason why is because what they see in the news is, the strikes and the wars and all the conflict.
Exactly, because it's an interesting story, news-wise.
Right.
But for the average John Doe around the world, there are other things that we are very relevant at. For example, innovation, entrepreneurship, the environment, arts and culture, our historic story, the history of the land of Israel.
Saying that we should do away with diplomacy because that's going to have to be there no matter what, but the government should put more emphasis on marketing the country.
I think the government has done a long way in the past few years. There's still a longer way to go. I think that we have to put more efforts in what messages we convey, not during times like Protective Edge, but also in the other days of the year. Which messages do we convey in order for Israel to be associated with positive brands and not just a conflict in which we are either right or wrong?
Okay, well, on that note, Mr. Asaf Luxemburg, a business development consultant, thank you so very much for joining us and for giving us a better perspective of really what Israel's government should be focused on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Sweeping changes have taken over Myanmar since the junta released its grip on outright power 3 years ago. And as millions get online for the first time, cheap mobile technology is igniting an internet revolution in the once isolated nation.
These tea shop customers are indulging in a pleasure that was once rare and risky in Myanmar: the internet. Sweeping changes since the junta released its grip on outright power 3 years ago has seen millions get online for the first time. And people are seizing the chance to leap into cyberspace.
I have seen people in developed countries getting online on their phones in buses or at train stations, wherever they want. I think Myanmar will become just like that.
Only about 1% of people had access to the internet during military rule. Now about a quarter of the population are thought to be able to get online. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. 2 foreign firms, Ooredoo and Telenor, have stormed into the local mobile phone market, selling SIM cards for around $1.50, more than 1,000 times cheaper than under the army regime. Myanmar tech experts predict up to half the population may have access to the web in just a few years, and most of them will be using their phones.
It's an important time for Myanmar. Suddenly getting access to high-speed internet and affordable mobile phone service. And this is a great chance to capitalize on that and actually begin to start building some of the apps and some of the digital services that Myanmar needs in order to take advantage of this connectivity revolution.
The dramatic changes have lured in a host of international online giants. Facebook is almost synonymous with the internet here, while Viber and Instagram are quickly gaining popularity. But local techies are also reveling in the new opportunities, looking to build vibrant homegrown apps and websites. In the bustling commercial hub Yangon, this designer has created an app to help frustrated commuters zip through the daily gridlock.
There are so many things I want to do. I think about it not as business, but as a way to find solutions to problems I face.
Imaginations are already ignited as Myanmar embraces internet for the masses and tries to accelerate out of the online slow lane.
Now for a look at a bunch of different reports we did not want you to miss in Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel.
How's it going?
Good, thanks for joining us.
As always, a pleasure.
So where's your first story from?
The New York Times has a very creepy story about subprime auto loans in the U.S. This is a story about debtors who receive a little remote control from the lenders, and this remote control can shut down their cars. They're taking out loans to pay for cars.
Specifically car companies, or we're talking about
it's specifically auto loan companies.
Okay.
So they go to other companies that sell them these remote controls. They give the remote controls to the borrowers, and the borrowers, if they default on the loan, sometimes 24 hours or 2 days after the payment date, their car can be shut down. These little things, they beep, 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 and you're taking your kids to work and they're beeping, and then the car can shut down. And the story in the New York Times talks about this case. This woman was on the freeway and her car shut down because they shut it down.
Wow.
She settled out of court because obviously this was illegal and dangerous, and there's basically no regulation around this. Now, the companies, the loan companies, say that this has upped the payments by 20%. The late payments have dropped by 20%.
Indeed,
but
it's a very creepy story. What else do we have here?
So we have from courts Narendra Modi.
Yeah.
This is a story depicting the new leader of India as the new leader of the world's poor, of the global south, if you will.
Right.
The new Lula. Brazil, Obama once called Lula the most popular politician in the world.
Right.
And this is kind of depicting Modi as the leader of the global south, the leader of the poor. There's a big difference, though. Modi comes from the right and Lula comes from the left.
Right.
Lula was sort of a champion of the workers, came from a working class background, came from auto work to politics. And Modi has been in politics for a long, long time. He's considered the business-friendly leader. He also has a lot of racial strife under his belt in India in his former job as the governor.
Right.
So there's a lot of big differences in the truth.
All right, well, Daniel, thanks for joining us and giving us some more information about Lula versus Modi. That's a wrap for us at The Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong-Faris. Please join us again tomorrow, and be well.